cool force powers, lightsaber battles, and the ability to hunt down Jedi as the apprentice of Darth Vader? That's right, Star Wars The Force Unleashed, a forgotten gem of Star Wars games that created quite the buzz back in the day. In this video, you'll learn how a small team persuaded George Lucas to greenlight the game, what caused the sequel to fail, why Disney killed the series, and how the downfall of The Force Unleashed resembles the path Lucasfilm has taken. To uncover these mysteries, we need to go back in time. In the summer of 2004, a small team of 6 developers at LucasArts was tasked with coming up with the next-gen Star Wars game. According to the developers, the main difficulty wasn't generating ideas, but choosing the right one. Considering the vastness of the universe, the possibilities were essentially limitless. Over the course of about a year, the team considered over 100 initial concepts, including the Third Old Republic game, a game about a Wookiee hero, a Darth Maul game, and even a game about the last descendant of Luke Skywalker, living 500 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. George Lucas was the ultimate decision maker, determining if a concept was compelling enough for the developers to pursue. He guided the team, emphasizing that the game should incorporate elements of adventure, humor, and drama. And since George was the one who rejected ideas proposed by the LucasArts team, technically it makes him responsible for the loss of KOTOR 3. The LucasArts team continued to brainstorm ideas and finally came up with The Force Unleashed, a story about Darth Vader's apprentice where the Force was taken to the extreme. The main idea was to take existing Force powers and essentially inject them with steroids. On paper, this approach was very interesting from a consumer's perspective, as such powerful and impressive Force abilities had never been seen before. The developers hoped that this new take on the Force, combined with next-generation gaming consoles, would provide players with unforgettable experiences. Eventually, the concept of the game was presented to George Lucas, including various concept art and short videos showcasing the core mechanics. According to the developers, after reviewing the materials they had prepared, George leaned back in his chair and said, "Go make that game." The developers were pleasantly surprised. Not only did they receive George Lucas's approval to create a game centered on Darth Vader's secret apprentice, but George also elaborated on how Vader would use fear, threats, and punishment to control the apprentice, while still holding out the promise of one day taking on the Emperor together. Although the concept and early storylines seemed interesting already, George emphasized the need to add emotional weight to the story, since it's vital to any Star Wars experience. This is how the love interest of Starkiller, Juno Eclipse, was introduced. By the way, the name Juno Eclipse was originally planned to belong to Osage Ventures, but was considered not villainous enough and was rejected. George was deeply involved in the process, providing invaluable feedback and encouraging the team to think creatively, even suggesting the creation of new characters to enrich the story. When the developers needed a consultation regarding the lore or permission to do something with an already established character, they would send a fax to George and he would send his answers back to the team. Looking over a number of unexplored and already existing characters, the creative team considered bringing either Qui-Gon's spirit or Darth Plagueis into the game's story through various methods. One was for a redeemed Plagueis to become Starkiller's mentor, much like General KOTOR in the existing game. Another had Plagueis as a major plot point by having Vader send his apprentice to search for Plagueis to resurrect Padme, or having Plagueis as a sort of tutorial element for players to get used to their dark side powers. Eventually, all these ideas were disapproved by George, since he wanted the team to develop a new cast of main characters. Do you think it would be cool to have Plagueis or Qui-Gon in the game? Feel free to express your opinion in the comments. The Force Unleashed was released on September 16, 2008. The game received fairly positive reviews from critics and players, praising the game's use of physics and the innovative mechanics of the Force powers. The narrative and characters, especially the inclusion of Darth Vader's secret apprentice and the emotional weight of the story, were well received too. Thanks to that, the game won the award for Best Video Game Writing. The Force Unleashed became the third best-selling game globally in the third quarter of 2008 with 1.7 million unit sales, and as of July 2009 it had sold 6 million copies, making it LucasArts' fastest-selling game. It was obvious that these guys would want to make a sequel. Little did they know the game would perform well below their expectations. Following the success of The Force Unleashed, LucasArts was eager to capitalize on the game's popularity with the sequel. The original game had been praised for its engaging story and innovative use of Force powers, so the development team aimed to expand on these elements, providing a deeper narrative and more refined gameplay mechanics. However, their aim was apparently quite off. One of the primary issues was the accelerated timeline. LucasArts wanted to release the game quickly to maintain the momentum generated by the first installment. This led to the sequel being developed in less than a year. The story of The Force Unleashed 2 felt significantly shorter, requiring only about 5 hours to complete compared to the 8 hours needed for its predecessor. This disparity arose because the writer Hayden Blackman had only 3 weeks to craft the story, whereas the first game had months of preparation just for the pitch to George Lucas. This resulted in an underwhelming narrative. Starkiller, now revealed to be a clone, goes on a journey to find his true identity while escaping from Vader. Although this added a layer of depth to his character, the story felt lackluster compared to the emotionally charged Jedi-killing action of the first game. Not to mention that the sacrifice from the first game felt less significant. Even though the story was weak, the game introduced some cool gameplay features. Players could now use 2 lightsabers and dismember or even decapitate enemies. Finishing moves were also added, making the combat feel more powerful. However, these improvements could not make up for the poor story. When The Force Unleashed 2 was released in October 2010, it received mixed reviews from critics and players. While the game was praised for its improved graphics and refined combat mechanics, it was criticized for its short length and underdeveloped story. The campaign was notably brief, with many players completing it in just a few hours. Additionally, the narrative failed to capture the same emotional depth and complexity that had made the first game so memorable. The commercial performance of The Force Unleashed 2 also fell short of expectations. Although the game sold well initially, bolstered by the strong brand and the success of its predecessor, it did not achieve the same level of sustained sales as the first game. The disappointing reception of The Force Unleashed 2 did not deter LucasArts from considering a third game. The sequel ended on a cliffhanger, leaving fans eager to see the conclusion of Starkiller's story. Almost a year and a half after Disney acquired Lucasfilm and all its subsidiaries, Sam Witwer, the voice actor for Starkiller, expressed his willingness to reprise his role. He mentioned that he and Hayden Blackman were working on a story for the new game. However, he noted that the game's release would likely be delayed until after the premiere of J.J. Abrams' The Force Awakens. Although information about The Force Unleashed 3 is limited, what is known suggests the game's narrative would have been more intricate and engaging. For example, did you know that The Force Unleashed 3 was supposed to be set in a more open-world environment compared to its predecessors? Although I personally don't think that we would have gotten something like Skyrim, also like Jedi Survivor/Fallen Order type of open world, it would have been a great improvement. Following the events of Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2, Boba Fett, secretly working for the Emperor, would track Starkiller's ship and shoot it down. His goal was not to save Vader, but to ensure that neither Starkiller nor Vader escaped the planet they were on. The plot would have seen the two forming an uneasy alliance to combat a new threat from Emperor Palpatine, who was supposedly preparing a replacement for Vader. This storyline aimed to explore the dynamics of their partnership, with Starkiller being uncertain if he could trust Vader or not. Additionally, the game was intended to feature a co-op system, allowing 2 players to control Starkiller and Vader simultaneously. Unfortunately, these ideas did not progress beyond the planning stages. On April 3, 2013, Disney decided to shut down LucasArts. This move was part of a broader strategy to shift the company towards a licensing model, leading to the termination of many ongoing projects, including The Force Unleashed 3. The cancellation of the game marked a significant turning point for the franchise. Just a few years later, Disney's practice of announcing numerous projects only to cancel them would become common for Star Wars. I find it amusing how the history of the Force Unleashed series mirrors Lucasfilm's path quite accurately. From the early projects where creators poured their hearts into the work, we gradually shifted to more faceless ones, where the primary goal was no longer to tell a good story, but to make as much money as possible. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like on your way out and consider subscribing. See ya!
Yes.